Okay. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for Dr. Hanson's senior lecture on medical waste.
Hey guys. Alright. My senior lecture is going to be on medical waste. And I'm not talking about what you may be thinking of, so unnecessary medical testing, hospital stays, big medical bills. I'm talking about trash and healthcare's carbon footprint. Why? I think probably most people in this room would believe that climate change is here, and it's projected to only get worse. And it will inevitably affect the basic requirements for maintaining human health. Humans can only stay healthy on a sick planet for so long. And we, in the healthcare industry, physicians especially, we are uniquely charged with tending to human health. And yet, we are among the world's leading polluters. Just a few statistics for healthcare in the US alone. We're responsible for 10% of our country's greenhouse gas emissions, 9% of our air pollutants, and at least 1% of the world's landfills. So it's time to clean up our act. I think we need to broaden the scope of our Hippocratic oath. I'm not the first one to say this. A lot of people are starting to say this. I think we need to broaden it to include not only the patients in front of us, but the patients we're going to be treating in the future and in future generations to come. So, to start off, I'm just going to set the scene and tell you guys a little story about trash that I discovered when I was doing my research in this country. Did anyone hear about this? Has anyone ever heard about this, the Mobro trash barge? No? Okay. So, going back to 1987, back in 1987, the landfills that we had were filling up. One in particular, pretty close to us here, was in Long Island in the town of Islip. It was filling up and it was looking for new ways to dispose of its trash. And this entrepreneur from Alabama, by the name of Hanson, was headed for bankruptcy, and he heard about this and he thought of a new opportunity. His bright idea was to buy the trash from Long Island and ship it by barge to landfills in the South. So he did this. That's actually the barge. Except when it got there, in North Carolina was its first stop. It made the news a little bit. There's a local news reporter who showed up and claimed to have spotted a bedpan on the barge. So then, out of concerns that the barge contained medical waste, it wasn't allowed to dock, and then it set out on a voyage that captivated the nation. There's a little video clip.
Officials again barred it from unloading.
There could be infectious waste from hospitals. There could be hazardous waste.
A homeless garbage barge.
That's when the story exploded.
Dripping brown ooze of possibly infectious material.
The governor of Louisiana threatened to send out the National Guard if the barge tied up there.
The Vagabond barge has become an international issue.
The most watched load of garbage in memory of man.
6 ports have already refused the refuse.
The barge has been chased away by the warplanes of 2 nations, and now it's anchored here, 5 miles off the coast of Key West, Florida. Still loaded with tons of garbage, still unwanted.
It was like a brush fire, you know. It was fun to belittle this barge full of garbage.
Take your barge.
Up into the Gulf of Persia, and there is Iran. Dump it
Then, in early May, a team from the EPA inspected the barge in Florida and reported finding trash from hospitals, but nothing that was truly hazardous. So the Mobro headed back to what seemed like its last best chance, New York.
From here to there and back again.
But when it reached New York Harbor, 2 court orders blocked it from unloading.
Nobody in an elected position could afford to take this tainted, mythologically frightening load of who knew what into their community.
As New York City's sanitation commissioner, Brendan Sexton faced public fears that seemed to be multiplying.
We don't know what kind of tropical vermin is in that garbage. We don't know, it's been sitting in the sun for 6 weeks.
Beyond the health worries, the media and experts often portrayed the Mobro as a symbol of a growing national problem. That landfill space was becoming scarce, and we were fast approaching a point of crisis.
We've about run out of places to throw away our throwaways.
By 1990, according to one federal survey, at least 27 states will be critically short of space to dump garbage.
When the county board in Sussex last month proposed opening a new garbage collection site, the residents were outraged and shook.
But on May 12th, a place to dump the Mobro's load appeared in, of all places, Iceland, the same Long Island town that had originally rejected the trash.
We'll take it because we think it's a one-time situation. We should do it and get it behind us.
In fact, state regulators had granted Iceland the right to expand its landfill by nearly 1 million tons, a financial windfall for the town. But before they could take the Mobro's load, a judge ordered that it all be burned in a Brooklyn incinerator. And that's what happened, over 5 months after the barge left port.
Okay, so that was 30 years ago. Our landfills were filling up. But it turns out that was overblown, which we'll talk about in a moment. But as you can see from this graph here, the Mobro was kind of a turning point in our nation's history. We started recycling, and that was 30 years ago. And the landfills that we thought were filling up, they were filling up. And our solution was to just build bigger ones. And we built them far away from any city whose residents could protest. Anyone know where this might be?
New Jersey.
Actually, on our Native American reservations. Which makes sense, considering our country's history with its true natives. First, we massacred them, we gave them the worst land to live on, where they can't grow anything, they have no economic opportunity, and then we started selling them our trash. But we were recycling too, which is good, but we also really increased our trash production, especially our production of plastics, which are theoretically recyclable. As you can see from this graph, nearly half of all the plastic ever manufactured has been since 2000. The first 10 years of this century, we created more plastic than in the entire century before. And most of this plastic is just for single-use items that we use once and throw away. And recycling companies have not been able to keep up.
So why would a recycling end up in a landfill? Recycling looks easy, sure. You put stuff in a bin, the truck picks it all up, and it all gets recycled, right? But where does it go when it leaves the curb? That big jumble of stuff has to be sorted at places like this. Here, workers grab things that aren't recyclable and throw them in the trash. What kinds of things they're grabbing depends on where you live. Many places can't recycle plastic bags, coffee cups, or styrofoam, so you can put them in your recycling bin, but they'll still end up in the trash. To make money, recycling companies have to take our piles of recycling and sort it into materials they can sell. The paper buyers don't want any plastic. The plastic buyers don't want any paper. Nobody wants paper or plastic that's covered in food waste. And the sorting process is far from perfect. Until recently, we still had buyers for contaminated recyclables.
There were Chinese buyers out there who were willing to buy it, paying high prices for material that honestly have a lot of contamination in it, a lot of things that shouldn't have been in there.
The U.S. produces about 130 million tons of recycling a year, and we can't reuse all of it here. About a third of it is sold to buyers overseas, and of that, nearly half was going to China. but not anymore.
Now they're cutting off. They're trying to clean up, so they don't want to take our garbage anymore. Countries do not want to be a dumping ground for the rest of the world.
Starting this year, China has new rules. They'll only buy recycling with 0.5% contamination or less. That's like 1 paper towel roll mixed in with 200 plastic bottles. Which brings us to, without Chinese buyers, some of our recycling has nowhere to go. Recyclers say they're slowing down and trying to do a better job of sorting. But the results still aren't clean enough for China. More and more recycling keeps coming. The only option left. So, is this the end of recycling as we know it? In some cases, yes. Some towns have stopped collecting curbside recycling. So all the stuff that used to be recycled now just goes to the dump. Other places are changing the rules. Take only the paper and plastic they know they can still sell. Some say the solution may be adding more curbside recycling bins, or tipping people who put the wrong things in the recycling. Perhaps we could get robots to sort out recycling for us. There's no one answer that'll fix everything that's broken in our recycling system. But there is one fix that's in our hands.
All right, so our recycling is no longer being blocked by China. Some of you may have seen this in the news. Portland, Oregon, which is like one of the most hippie towns, environmental friendly in the U.S., their recycling is going to landfills. And as far as our trash goes, back in 1987, the Mobro barge was a big deal because 3,000 tons of garbage traveled 6,000 miles for disposal. And 30 years ago, that was a symbol of our nation's growing problem. But today, New York City alone sends the equivalent of 7 Mobro barges to landfills every day. That's 50 barges a week, 2,600 barges every year. Just 8.5 million tons of garbage. And while we humans aren't yet choking on our plastic, our marine life is. I'm sure you guys seen this in the news. Whales dying, eating our plastic bags. These are plastic bags taken from the stomach of a dead whale. But are we eating our plastic too? The answer is yes.
What is a microplastic?
In the form of microplastics.
When larger plastic items, toothbrushes, bottles, bags, break down over decades, they float in the water and get eaten by sea life. They cause 2 problems. First, the fragments act like a sponge to other toxins in the water, pesticides and flame retardants, for example, suctioning them up and concentrating them. Secondly, they are themselves complex polymers, molecules the body can't fully break down. When they get really tiny, into a billionth of a meter as a nanoplastic, scientists have shown they can cross tissue membranes into fish cells. They say that is harmful to fish, their reproduction, immunity, survival skills. What we don't know is what happens when humans eat the fish or sea life. Is it harmful to us? It's already an urgent question. A leading US government scientist told CNN plastic is definitely in our food chain and drinking water. This isn't something maybe happening to our children. It's already here.
Alright, so yeah, we're consuming microplastics. This is an infographic from a study that has not yet been published in a peer-reviewed journal, but it made the news just this past week. It's from the University of Newcastle in Australia, estimating that the average human ingests about a credit card's worth of plastic every week. This is displaying tap water samples taken from all around the world. They all contain plastic. You can see the countries that are highlighted, US, Europe, India, have the highest percentage of plastic in their drinking water. Is this harmful? We don't really know. Of course, if some 30-year-old girl came to my ER and was like, I ate maybe a credit card's worth of plastic in the past week, I would definitely send her home, but the long-term effects are less certain. We do know the chemicals that are added to plastics, which give them their desirable properties, these chemicals are absorbed by the human body and likely have toxic effects. Studies from the CDC have shown that nearly all adults had urine detectable levels of BPA, 93%. And higher urinary levels of BPA have been associated with higher rates of cardiovascular disease in humans. Of course, this is an association, it's not causation. But animal studies have shown that acute BPA exposure can cause arrhythmias, and chronic low-level exposure results in cardiac remodeling, coronary artery disease, and higher blood pressure. And plastics contribute to global warming, which is going to harm us. About 8% of the world's oil production goes to just making plastic. And these studies are showing that when it degrades, it releases greenhouse gases. This starts when the plastics are exposed to sunlight and continues in the dark and accelerates exponentially as the plastics break down into microplastics. So why should we care? In healthcare, we love plastic. Before the 1970s, most medical devices were made of metal, glass, rubber, all materials that can be disinfected and sterilized for countless reuses. But in the 1980s, we began shifting towards single-use versions made from plastics. Some people attribute this to the HIV epidemic, saying it raised fears about the risks of recycling medical equipment. However, it was demonstrated that sterilization techniques killed the virus, and still the trend towards disposables kept growing. And we justify it in the name of protecting our patients and decreased infection risk. But I think we have to admit that it's probably more likely about money and convenience and not wanting to be liable. So if you think about it, single-use devices are cheaper. And if we have to keep throwing them out, the companies who make them can continue selling us more. As far as the money that companies spend on research and development, it's a lot quicker, easier, and cheaper for medical device companies to tell the FDA that the product can only be used once, and after that it has to be thrown away. Just adding a small piece of plastic to equipment that used to be all metal makes it impossible to sterilize. Furthermore, sterile packaging, if we open it in the name of sterility, if we don't use it, we have to throw it away. So this is an especially big problem in ORs. Many warranties for these devices go as far as to say as they're only covered for one trip into the OR. So if surgery is canceled for whatever reason and the device was brought in, even if it wasn't opened, hospitals are throwing them away. Hospitals don't want to be held liable if these companies won't stand by the integrity of their products. But some people have started to do something about this. Since 2000, reprocessing of these reported single-use medical devices has started to become a business. There are a lot of companies doing this, and it's estimated about 2% of all the single-use equipment we use is eligible for reprocessing. This is a lot of laparoscopic equipment used in the OR, a lot of scissors, other tools that we use in the ER as well. And this industry is regulated by the FDA, so it meets the same regulations as the original device makers, and then these devices can be resold at a fraction of the cost to hospitals. So it ends up saving the hospitals a lot of money, and there are no additional health risks associated with this practice. In 2008, the Government Accountability Office conducted a study showing no additional health risk from reprocessed medical devices. This is from one company who does this in 2009. They estimated that they diverted approximately 2,650 tons of garbage from landfills, which is almost as big as the Millbrook Arch. So, what can we do? Hopefully, maybe you're a little motivated to at least change your practice in some way. There's a lot we can do, even in our day-to-day practice right now, without changing any hospital-wide practices. But this is my QI project. you all recognize these. One is the ABG kit that we have at county. The other is the heparin syringe that we use at UHB. So every time we send a shock panel or a lactate every single sepsis patient, we're opening one of these ABG kits just for the heparinized syringe. This is totally just probably overlooked. I'm sure hospital administration doesn't realize we're doing this. And every time we do it, we're throwing away all of these excess materials. That's 2 needles, you know, nobody's using the Band-Aid, the extra alcohol swab, the iodine swab, the gauze, this label, where you have to write the temperature on it. We don't do that anymore. The plastic bags sometimes we use. And how many times have you guys opened a pack and the little cap like goes on the floor? You have to open a whole nother pack. It's just like so wasteful. All of it goes in the trash. So I got the statistics for county, just for venous shock panels, ordered from the ER only in the past year. How many needles do you guys think we threw away?
20,000. No, it's really more than that. 100,000. 200,000.
It's from the ER only, 46,842 needles thrown away. Unfortunately, I didn't get the cost savings on if we were to change from the ABG packet to the just single heparin syringe. But in waste disposal alone, so that's 624 gallons worth of sharps that we throw away from these kits alone. That's enough to fill an 8-person hot tub. And from just waste disposal alone, all of these sharps are going into the biohazard sharps containers, which are a lot more costly to dispose of than regular trash. So say each needle costs like 5 cents. This is at least $6,000 we're saving in just purely throwing away things that we never used. This is a personal point of disgust for me, chucks. Chucks are great, you know, they have some very good uses, but we use them for way too much. Every single spill on the ground, rather than just cleaning it up, we throw a chuck over it. We use it whenever there's even a thought of a potential speck of blood getting on a surface or a patient, which is a nice thing to do, but it's not really necessary. And then we just use them for other things. Like, I don't even know what this truck is doing there.
To hide your cell phones.
Okay. Hiding things. Hiding things. Okay, I've seen nurses lay out their lunch on a chuck, put their purses in a chuck, they've been thrown over broken crack pipes on the ground. Like, it's just unnecessary. And every single time a piece of plastic is going to the landfills. It takes at least 30 years to break down, and when it breaks down, it's toxic. Another thing we could improve are disposable laceration trays. One, it's a lot of plastic we're throwing away. Two, there's a lot of materials in there we don't use. How many people have thrown away unused hemostats in the sharps containers? Like, all the time.
But you can reuse those, no? That's the kind of thing that would be recycled or?
Yeah, so we can't. Our hospital does not have a process for it, but if somebody wants to do this, start collecting them. The unused ones, there are a lot of organizations that collect these supplies and divert them to countries who don't have a lot of resources who will use them. I spoke with Karen, I don't know if she spoke with you, Ben, about maybe starting to collect some things to go to Tanzania.
Yeah, I use a couple different of these medical refuse companies that donate.
Yeah. So at least, you know, we can divert them where they'll be used once before going to a landfill. So things we can do now. Reduce our use of single-use devices. We can reuse or repurpose devices whenever possible. And then we can donate unused items that we aren't using, donate to people who could really use them. So this is not the world I want to live in. I don't know about you guys. The Lancet Commission characterized climate change as both the biggest global health threat, but also the greatest global health opportunity of the 21st century. So there's a lot we can do. And that's it. Hopefully you feel inspired. Just a few things. Thanks to Dr. Verma. He jumped on this as soon as I approached him about replacing our ADG kits. He's all about it. Very supportive. So hopefully that will actually come in the future. Thanks to my dad for helping me estimate cubic space filled by abnormally shaped objects, aka sharks falling into a shark container. The people who got me the residency, my class, not many of you are here, but we're certainly not the worst class. We're pretty good. My first residency boyfriend and my last. And my cat. Residency may only be 4 years, but cat club is forever. Any questions?
And to Beth's point, anything autoclavable that you want to give me, I will accept.
Cool.
Okay, take 5, still have a 10 minutes, okay? Take 10 minutes. You want to end early? You can 5.